Microphone check, 1, 2.
Jen, is this yours or? Are we ready to go? Can we go or no? This one is what you're putting on us? Good, we're on? Okay, we're live now. All right. Oh, good. Glad you could join us. Thank you. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's great to see some people live in the studio audience that we have here. So welcome. And it's great to be talking to the community right here about something that could have a long-lasting positive impact upon our students here in the district. So I really appreciate that. We have the cameras. We'll also be streaming this. And I think more and more people are staying home at these meetings because it's so comfortable to be able to stay in your pajamas and just watch these things on TV. But we're also going to be recording this for people that can't watch this tonight. So they'll be able to watch that. They'll be downloaded and put on our webpage, on the district webpage, and they'll be able to see that shortly. So just moving along, the Ridgewood Public Schools has prided itself on a tradition of excellence. And over the many years, there's been many changes. If you just think about technology or how that's affected school systems, the curriculum, and just the structure of the school day has changed over many years. And these decisions were always made on the latest research and the different findings that were available at the time. If you think back at Ridgewood High School, over 25 years ago, Ridgewood High School switched to the rotating drop schedule. And that was based on the latest research at that time. And it brought some challenges and it brought some concerns with people. And the high school was, pretty cutting edge at that time. There wasn't many, if any, schools around this area that were doing that kind of schedule. And now that seems to be the norm. The elementary and the middle schools followed suit with doing tweaks to their schedule. The middle schools followed a couple of years after that and went to the rotating drop that you have now. And there's been other types of changes to the schedule over the years. And these decisions were made after much research and many discussions with the community, administrators, and the teachers. And all these decisions were made for the benefits of the students. And today we find ourselves in a very similar situation. So tonight I'm going to lay out the argument why school schedules need to shift for the betterment of students. And then next week, we're going to be asking for parents, teachers, and students and community members to weigh in and give us feedback on how we should proceed. I'm Tom Gorman. I'm the superintendent of schools. Stacy Polster is in front of me. She's the assistant superintendent. She'll also be doing some presentations tonight. We have Jen Weinkoff, we have Charlene Labenda and Lucy Papamichael, who also helped a lot with the slides and a lot of the material support. We really appreciate all the work they do behind the scenes. So thank you, ladies. We also created an alternative schools or alternative schedules task force. That's made up of Board of Ed trustees, administrators, faculty members, and parents. And they've been meeting over the past 6 months to talk about these issues. And that's what's kind of brought us here today. And their work is not done. So after tonight, they're going to have a lot more work ahead of them to really start fine tuning this and figure out how do we have to move forward in the future. And I'd also like to thank the Smart Balance Group. There's a committee that was formed at the high school with parents. They worked with the administrators at the high school for the past probably about 12 years on different ways to improve the overall well-being of the students. So they've had a lot of input in this and helping us along the way. So with that said, how did we get here? I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of the timeline and just go through this quickly. So that Smart Balance initiative that I was just talking about, the focus was more on student health, creating a culture of wellness in the schools. A year later, they created a student advisory committee that worked with the vice principals and the principals about different issues that were affecting the kids. Kids would give us a lot of feedback, and a lot of changes were implemented because of that. One example is the homework-free breaks that we all enjoy right now. We also stopped giving homework over the major holidays of the religious holidays that were out there, and they've been just part of the culture now. 2 years after that, we brought enrichment mornings to the high school, and what that means is a little over more than one per month that the students get to sleep in one day, and the teachers have professional development, and it seems to be working extremely well. They get that little balance. It's a nice way to figure out, they get to sleep in a little bit, and then we still have the teachers in the building and working on different things that we need to. That led to discussions about adolescent sleep and later start times. And then that led us to 2015 when we started the well-being speaker series here. Sometimes they're held here or at GW, informing the parents about different things that are affecting them. That could be cell phone usage by students. We brought in somebody talking about athletics and younger kids, all different types of topics that are relevant, and they've been very effective. 2017, we moved to some more discussions about later start time, and that's when the New Jersey Department of Education started getting involved. They started talking about pilot programs and getting some more research. They had they were gathering information from a lot of the different educators out there. And this is also when you started seeing some more research being published, as well as the American Pediatrics Academy weighing in on things. I'm not sure exactly what year they endorsed the later start time for adolescents, but it's around that time, 17, 18, that they came out and definitively said this is better for students. The following year, it moved to bigger discussions with the athletic director, the middle school administration, and we started talking about this a little bit more openly. So about 2 years ago, we continued this whole thing about advocacy for 6 through 12, and then of course the pandemic hit, and we actually were able to take advantage of that. So when we were having the kids remote and then coming in for part of the day and doing things, we shifted the schedule a little bit, and we started the school day a little bit later, and it worked extremely well. And there were a lot of anecdotal benefits that people shared with us. And then that brings us to this year, and we formed this Alternative Schools Task Force that was made up by the people I just told you about, and we're here tonight. So why are we even talking about this? What are the positives? What does the research show? So there's a lot of scholarly research. And as I just said, the Academy of Pediatrics recommends that we do later start time for adolescents. There's a lot of research that's pretty undeniable of what are the benefits for the students. And what it does is it helps align the circadian rhythms of the students. So, and what does that mean? That means like if you're laying in bed, you go to sleep, you shut off your alarm, you pull down your shades, when do you just naturally wake up? And that shifts throughout your time. We know young kids get up real early and we want to sleep in a little bit more and they're pulling on your legs. So you have these things and you shift throughout time. And of course, everybody knows teenagers, they love to sleep in late, and if they can sleep the whole morning away. But it's not just because they're lazy, it's because of how their bodies are designed and what the changes are that they're going through. So, so that's what happens. And what happens when your body aligns with the circadian rhythms, it helps improve the physical health of students. One example is reduced obesity with the risks there. You have other things with well-rested athletes. Students have fewer absences, fewer tardies. Adolescents need about 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep, and all studies nationwide show that they're far below that national norm. So mental health, you see reduced depression and anxiety rates. You see less risky behaviors with drug and alcohol use and other negative behavior, decision-making that those kids are making. Safety, you see a reduction in number of accidents on the road and other types of things that putting kids in harmful situations. And there's an increase in academic performance. Students have better retention, better comprehension. They're able to cope with their academic workloads better. And there's improved student engagement in the classrooms. Basically, what it comes down to is there's an overall well-being that affects these kids when they're able to align or better align their circadian rhythms with their times of waking up. But of course, it doesn't go that smoothly. There's going to be challenges. Some of the challenges that we see, and of course, Ridgewood, always has the trifecta of all the challenges. So one of them is we have one of the longer contractual days compared to a lot of surrounding towns and towns around the state. Transportation, we have that. A lot of school districts don't have transportation issues. We have shared athletic fields. We don't have, like if you go down to South Jersey when they have endless fields that they're able to use, we have to use these and share them with youth sports. And one of the challenges that goes with that is you may have to shift the end time of the school day, depending on what we choose and how we go about this, which may affect, we have to move the practices of the high school sports, which means we have to bump maybe the athletics for the youth sports a little bit later, and the impact there. We have control over our schedule, so we can move the start time, just say of a baseball game from 4 o'clock to 4:15, get that in, and our kids will be fine. But not all the surrounding schools are going to be willing to adjust to a 4:15 start, and they get to dictate. The home school gets to dictate. So if they said, no, you have to stay at 4 o'clock, that would mean that a lot of the athletes would have to leave the last period of the school day earlier and miss some of that time there in school. And that's something that we have to think about. So you have potential transportation issues. You have a shift in after-school activities for the younger students as well as the older students. Childcare issues may be affected by this. Parental and professional schedules may have to shift. And of course, there's always this challenge to anything with a change, adjusting school schedules and what does that do to students and parents until you get it worked out and it becomes the norm. And with that, I'm going to bring up the Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Polstra.
So good evening. It's great to be here tonight to kind of share where we are in this journey on the Alternative Schedules Task Force. And as Dr. Gorman said, when we started to explore this and formed this committee to start to look into these issues regarding scheduling, we formed 3 different committees to kind of break out the work, knowing there were many issues for us to tackle and research. One group was dedicated to teaching and learning. The second group was dedicated to community connections. And the third group looked at operational management. And within each of those, there were separate issues, but again, some overlap. So there were times when we met separately as subcommittees and other times when we came back together to share what had been in front of us. Our teaching and learning committee really did look at instructional issues, use of time in the classroom. What are the benefits of shorter periods or extending and making longer periods? Were there things that we have an opportunity to bring in to our schools as a result of shifting our schedules that we feel would be beneficial for our students that we don't currently have? In terms of community connections, we wanted to explore, how this shift in schedule would impact the community at large. Are there opportunities if we shift the school schedule to find, connections for our students in the community to do work beyond the classroom, for example? And even smaller things as Dr. Gorman was talking about in terms of, how will this impact other groups that use our schools after school? How would it impact recreational sports across the town? And then in operational management, that group really dug into the logistical issues. Things around transportation are real issues that most districts face when they decide to make some shifts in schedules. And how can we manage those logistics should we make a change in our schedules? So as those 3 committees met, subcommittees and the larger committee came back together, we kind of put some shared things on the table and identified, common key pieces that we considered non-negotiables and other things that we all felt were important to prioritize as we continue to dig into the development of different schedules. First, our non-negotiables are that, of course, we are required to adhere to the contract for our teachers. That is something that is negotiated with them. And so any changes would have to fit within the parameters of our contracts. We also wanted to maintain instructional time. We felt it was very important that our students get the same amount of classroom time with their teachers for instruction in the classroom, and we did not want to compromise that. And then the other non-negotiable as we move forward here was based on all of the sleep research regarding young adolescents, for us to find the best possible way to move that start time to align with what the research is telling us is best for adolescents. The priorities you can see on the right. Everybody wanted to really keep our focus on student learning and well-being, that there was an opportunity here for us, like I said, to look at what are some things we'd like to bring into our programs that maybe we now have the opportunity to do. And we also recognize that our academic periods should not be less than 50 minutes. We kind of felt there's a tipping point in terms of student engagement and really drawing meaning and relevance during lesson time. We also felt it would be a priority for us to make sure that we include time for student support and extra help. For example, we have period 9 at the high school, which is used by many of our students to seek the extra help and support that they need. And since that is something that is very well received by our students, our parents, and our teachers, we wanted to make sure that we built time in the day to preserve that. We also have to think about the best way to use our staff and maximize the resources that we have. And lastly, we wanted to think about where are the opportunities for us to think a little bit bigger. There are some very exciting initiatives happening in the district right now when we look at things like our middle school portfolio initiative, when we look at the capstone projects that are starting to be introduced in greater abundance at the high school. And so how can we think about creative ways to ensure that we think beyond just the traditional, schedule and classroom instruction within the 4 walls and going from class to class? So can we find some opportunities for that type of flexibility, but that will allow us to take our program even further? So at the elementary level, what we considered is that if you do a later start time at the secondary level, what that may translate to is a possible earlier arrival and start time for teachers and students, depending upon the final agreed upon schedules. We have to stagger schedules with at least 15 minutes of start time between, so everybody can't start at 8:15 or 8:30, although that would be the ideal perhaps. So if we're going to shift 6-12 later, that means we either have to shift K-5 earlier or go even later. So we'll look at some examples as we go through, of course. The other thing that we were really looking at to line up with the priorities that I just identified is to look at some opportunities to expand instructional time at the elementary level. So as we started to play with some ideas, there could possibly be space at the elementary level for a flex period of about 30 minutes per day, somewhere between 30 and 45. And this flex period would allow us to bring in certain things like enrichment opportunities, for example. You could use that flex period for assemblies. We could look at cross-grade experiences, even certain things like pull out instrumental lessons from time to time when students now may be missing class time for lessons. Maybe we could use this flex period for that, maybe some basic skills instruction. So adding that flex period, we feel, could provide us with a lot of opportunities at the elementary level that would enhance the student experience. And of course, we would adhere to the REA contract for the length of day, teacher preparation, lunch periods, all of those things that are within the constraints of our contractual obligations. So if we look at the elementary options, what you see as option 1 is what we currently have. Our student day starts at 8:45. Our student day ends at 3 o'clock. And I just want to qualify for everyone that These are student start and end times. There are teacher contractual obligations beyond these times. So I just want to make that clear. We're talking about student start and end times in these examples today. So that's what we currently have for student start and end. Option 2 could maintain an 8:45 start time. But if we wanted to include the flex period that I was just describing, the end time for students would be 3:30. Okay. The other option, as I said, because everybody can't start at 8:15 or 8:30, is to consider shifting elementary to start at 8 o'clock. Students are younger, that sleep rhythm has not hit them yet. They're not quite at puberty. So there is an opportunity for those students to start at 8 o'clock, to end at 2:45, and then to include that flex period that would provide us with different opportunities for our elementary students. So those are 3 options that we are considering, or that we're going to ask for your input on regarding elementary. So it's important for parents, as you're weighing all of these things, right, to think about all of these factors that are listed here. And I won't go through all of them, of course, but from, a logistical family standpoint, if students were to start at 8 o'clock as opposed to 8:45, how would that impact my child care before and after? How might that impact my ability to transport my child to school if my child doesn't take a bus? How might that impact my child's after school activities? And there is a real potential cost impact of switching transportation for busing. That's something that we also have to consider, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then the other way, the last bullet on here may not seem to resonate right now if you have elementary students, but one way to potentially save on busing costs, should there be transportation increases, is to consider combining bus routes to include students in grades 6 through 12. So, even if you have a 4th or 5th grader now, a shift in time, if there's a need to save, to manage transportation costs, that is also a consideration should we shift sometimes. Okay, if we look at the middle school level, this is where, many students begin to hit puberty. And so making their start time a little bit later, that would result in later student dismissal, as well as a later end of day for teachers. So based on stakeholder feedback, as we met with committees, we did want to maintain the middle school model. We feel that teaming structure and using the houses that we have is really beneficial for our students. So we wanted to maintain that, but also we were still looking at certain improvements that the middle school staff members shared with us that they had about the current schedule. So we wanted to address those. And we also wanted to explore ways to integrate some of our district initiatives related to teaching and learning. So I shared, the middle schools have a fantastic portfolio initiative that they have been working on last year and is continuing to grow this year. So as we think about the ways that students demonstrate their learning, and we're valuing this creation of student portfolios, can we leverage and create a schedule that enables us to continue to move forward with that initiative? So at the middle school, we have a few more options. This is our current schedule. Currently, option 1, we start at 8 o'clock, end at 2:53. We rotate 6 periods a day at 57 minutes per period. So you don't always see, if I have math period 1, I don't have to go to math period 1 every single day and be sleepy. It rotates through, which we find has been beneficial. If we want to move that time, we could go from 8:15 to 3:08. And that would be the current schedule, give or take, with a later start time. And then option 3 would move the middle school to start at 8:30 under the current schedule. That would result in a student end time of 3:23. What in option 4 and option 5, we get time back because we wouldn't have 6 periods per day. We would reduce to 4 periods a day. And when you reduce to 4 periods per day, you gain back minutes that were given to students for passing time in the hallways. So with that gain of those minutes back with fewer passing times, You add those and you create longer periods, but fewer of them per day. So in option 4, we would have, somewhere between an 80 and a 90-minute period, but fewer of them per day. And you would start at 8:15 and end at 2:51. And then option 5 would be the 8:30 start time with an end time of 3:06. So those are 5 options for middle school that show you, as you shift 15 minutes or a half an hour, what the end of day looks like, the length of day, what it looks like, and what you could do to have either our current schedule of 6 periods a day or dropping to 4 periods per day. And again, those same considerations, right? If you have a middle schooler, or you're thinking about, okay, does my child, you probably don't have as much before or after care to worry about, but maybe they come home and take care of a sibling. You are going to start to see an impact and shifts in your child's sleep patterns as they hit middle school. Parents will have to consider their own work schedules and family schedules. How do you think this shift may impact your child's academic performance? And again, what is your child involved in after school? And would a shift to a later end time have an impact on their activities after school? Along with the transportation, which you also see there. And lastly, kind of the same issue at the high school level, right? If you're going to start later in grades 9 through 12, you're going to have later student dismissal and a later end of day for teachers, all right? Because we are preserving instructional time, and we want to make sure that we maintain the academic integrity of the program that we have in place. We want to maintain the program offerings that we have. We think that's very valuable, and make sure that we integrate period 9 and hold on to that as something that is used very well by our high school students. As Dr. Gorman alluded to, especially as you move up to the high school level, this does have an impact on after school activities and athletics. So, we're exploring how we can best reduce the impact of that, because there may be times when, as Dr. Gorman shared, if students have to be on a bus to be at a competition, whether it be academic, athletic, or whatever it may be, they may have to be released early from the last period of the day in order to get to that activity on time. If we rotate periods, those kids wouldn't necessarily be pulled out of the same period every time, but still we want to be clear that it may impact our students who may have to leave early, depending upon their involvement in certain after-school activities, right? So if we look at what we have right now, we start at 7:45 at the high school and end at 2:50, right? And this is not inclusive of period 9. Period 9 support happens after student dismissal. So I just want to be clear on that. Option 2 is to take the current schedule that we have, shift it a half an hour to provide 30 minutes of extra sleep time for our adolescents, and keep the similar schedule that we have now, running it from 8:15, dismissal would be 3:20. If we take that same schedule, maintaining instructional minutes and the parameters in place that we have, and we start at 8:30, 45 minutes later, that results in a dismissal time of 3:35 for our high school students, not inclusive of period 9. So you can see it starts to get later than what we're used to. If we go and do something similar like we did with, the options that were also presented with the middle school, where you have fewer classes per day, you take that reduction in passing time, you apply it to longer periods, we can maintain the instructional time that we have with our students, starting at 8:15 and ending at 3:05. That would be a block, what they call a block schedule. And then if we wanted to do that same block schedule, what we see in option 5 with an 8:30 start time, then that would result in a dismissal of 3:20, again, not inclusive of period 9. We want you to have the mic. So can you hold it? And I'll come back to this slide when we're done. Sure. Okay, well, we'll certainly take can we take the question at the end so everybody can hear it? Because we have mics, because it won't show up on the video without that. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And again, here are, again, very similar impacts, right? Regardless of the age of your child, transportation, after-school schedules, parent work schedules, maybe they care for a sibling when they come home, maybe high school students have a part-time job. These are all kind of the factors that, people need to think about. Should we go in the direction of making this change? And so it's important for, people to weigh all of these as they give us input and feedback on what we have put on the table at this point. Okay, Dr. Gorman.
So we talked about potential costs. With transportation, right now we have 21 bus routes with 2 different bus companies. So we talked to them and, they just give us an educated guess and what we were talking to them. Right now, based on some of the things that we shared with them and what their working knowledge is, it could come out to about 4 more bus routes. 4 more bus routes to make things work could equate to about $75,000 more. And then, as everybody's been reading, there's a shortage of buses and all the bus problems and all that stuff. We're expecting some kind of an increase statewide level, 15, 20% increases in bus transportation costs in the following years. So that's if it's like 4. If you have to go to 5 buses or something like that, it could go as high as 100,000. And those aren't to be sticker shocks. It's just to be transparent and let you know there could be a busing cost issue. However, as we brought up there, if the surveys do determine that parents are okay with putting middle school students and high school students on the same bus, which many districts around the nation have done, then maybe you could consolidate some buses and work out different routes, and that could be a cost saver. We don't know that until we get some more of the feedback from all of you. So that is one. The other thing people said, like if you did go to a longer period of time, we may have to do some more professional development with some of our teachers and things like that. But that type of stuff could be absorbed very easily in our current budget with our professional development budget costs that are already allocated. So what Ms. Polster showed you about the start and end times, we wanted to put them out there. Again, not to shock you or scare you, but these are the parameters. This is as wide as we could go. It may come in a little bit. Start and end times may shift a few minutes depending on what goes on. We'll call it the guts of the schedule. The guts of the schedule will be worked out with the teachers and the different principals at the building levels to figure out what exactly has to be done. Do you shift lunch a little bit? Do you cut down on passing times? All these add up to minutes so you can make a slightly different schedule depending on what works best with our students. But the reason why we showed those start and end times was to really just get you to start thinking about, okay, how could this affect my schedule? With my work schedule, with my childcare issues, with sports or other things that may be going on, so that you could start saying, okay, this would shift me this. Oh, that's not so bad. We actually can make that work. And then you'll be weighing in on that stuff on the survey next week. So just real important things, just to reiterate what we were just talking about, we need to take a long view for children across the different grades. And the survey is one data point to gather information from you. As we said, we had that committee of 30 to 50 parents and teachers and administrators working on this stuff. We have this survey. We have other administrative meetings, and we'll be definitely having some more Board of Education meetings. And after we get the survey information, we'll be sharing that out with the community. We'll be making some more decisions. We'll be going back and forth and trying to come up with the best schedule for the whole district. Again, you have to look at the future. So just because it may work for your child in elementary school now, you have to think about what's going to happen with your child 3 years from now, 6 years from now. The timetable that we have is pretty tight. We have to go out for bids for busing. Just knowing the parameters, like, okay, we're agreeing on 8:15 and 8:30, whatever, we need to have those parameters pretty set by February, maybe March, because we have to go out for bid to get the results from those guys, those companies, to figure out what the cost will be, and we can build that into the budget. But again, the guts can still be worked out later on with our teachers and administrators. And that's about it. So hopefully we can start moving forward with a lot of this data information, sharing it out with you. And we're hoping, I don't know, I would say by April, May, have a pretty good, solid idea of what we're going to do. And I have to be honest with you, I don't know what the exact right decision is. And all the research and all the other schools that we've talked to that have moved this way across the country, there is no right answer. The right answer depends on your community, and it depends on the challenges and the positives that are affecting all of you. And it's really a value decision by the community about what they feel best is for the children. So what works well out in Colorado or Michigan for different schools may or may not work well for us, including what goes on in two towns away. As I told you, we have that trifecta. So a lot of schools are not affected by the shared athletic fields or the transportation things. So they don't have to consider a lot of these things that we do have to consider. So we're going to leave you with that. We are going to go into some questions. The survey will go out. We're hoping by Tuesday or Wednesday at the latest. It will be open for 2 weeks. We'll gather all that feedback. At the very end of the survey, there will also be an open-ended question that people can give whatever feedback they want. So with that, I want to thank you for all your attention and everything. And we're going to go for any questions people have. However, we have to walk around with the mic because be able to pick up your voice and have it recorded. So we'll start off with any question. We have the one question over
I just
there.
want to say about the survey also, before we take questions, is that within the survey itself, there will be a link to this presentation because it will be recorded, as well as a link to the slides that you just saw, plus the graphics will be, as we ask people to rank their options, the graphics will be presented there. So, don't feel like you have to remember everything that you saw tonight because it will be available to you as a link in the survey.
Oh, you can do that both. Yeah, you want to take that other side? Thanks, John. All right.
We can start. I'll go.
Oh, let's go. Yeah, well,
T-shirt. That microphone's on.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I have two questions. So one is about the longer class periods.
Sure.
I know during COVID, I have middle schoolers at the time and elementary, but during COVID, I heard from both of them that it was very painful with the longer class periods. And so I think they lost it. Their attention span didn't hold for the length of the class. And I know that we retracted and changed it a bit. So that's one of my questions. And my second question would be, I know that you said we can't compare ourselves to other towns, but I would be interested to know what other towns are doing, because to me, this seems like a tremendous amount of work for 15 or 30 minutes, where I think it kind of falls on my parenting skills to tell my kids to go to bed a little bit earlier than to give them 15 more minutes in the morning. But if other towns are doing something similar, I think that's important for us to know and have a comparison.
yeah. Well, all right. So the two questions there. So right around our immediate area, we'd probably be one of the first really pushing this way and doing this. Nationwide, it is growing, but you do have them throughout the state. Princeton shifted about 2 or 3 years ago. Other schools have shifted throughout the Midwest, out west, things like that. And we've talked to a number of these schools. So it is a growing trend. You're seeing more and more. And it is a big discussion topic. And I think you're going to see this happen more. With the longer blocks of time, I'm not saying we're going to do that, but I'm just going to give you an example. So 90 minutes was something that has been endorsed by the Middle School Association since the 1980s. It was a block schedule amount of time. There's a lot of research that backs it up. I know a 90-minute schedule scares a lot of people, but many of the schools that I've visited, it's just with any other schedule, you get used to it after a year or so. I've talked to many teachers and administrators who have had 90 minutes, and they've said, I couldn't imagine going back the other way. So it's just like, we're just talking to some people, when we went from 45 minutes or 43 minutes at the high school with 9 periods a day, they shifted to the hour long. And people are like, oh my God, I can't, and then they make the shift. And then 2 years after that, you forget about that. But I'm not endorsing one way or the other, but I am saying there's plenty of research and plenty of other schools that have been doing 90, 80, 70 minutes and had no problems with it. At the high school, you have 80 minutes. They all present challenges. Every school, every schedule has its inherent problems, challenges, and difficulties. So you have to remember that. So there is no sweet spot that's going to work for everybody. But it is something that we're going to tease out as we do the survey and we have further discussions. So. Yeah. You have the, oh, you stole the mic from him? All right.
Sorry. Tony wanted to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tony.
You want to go, Tony?
We'll come back to.
So first of all, Tom and Stacy and team, thank you for the presentation. I think it was great and you laid out everything and transparency. So thanks for that. The only question, well, a couple of questions or comments. You said one of the non-negotiables is the instructional time. And obviously by kind of saying that as a condition, right, where we either have to extend the day or do double or longer periods, which I do think is a little bit maybe challenging for a lot of the kids. So I guess my question there is, why do you say, like, what is the research or the facts or the data behind that instructional time is non-negotiable? Because I do feel they're in class a long time. I've heard we have higher instructional time than a lot of other districts. I don't know if that's true or not.
No, we do. We do.
Yeah,
We have a longer school day. So that goes back to the contractual obligations. So just say you have a math class and over the course of the year, we'll just say 1,000 minutes. You don't want to change the schedule and all of a sudden then we're going down to 700 minutes over the course of the year, because then you're going to start hearing complaints. Well, now I have to squeeze the same kind of curriculum in less time. And then you have the contractual obligations that teachers have to teach a certain amount of minutes and things like that. But there is some wiggle room that you can negotiate and do things like that. You get a little bit creative, but there are pretty hard parameters that you have to work around. But that would be teased out as we move forward. Absolutely.
Right, but I mean, the reason I'm asking is if that is, if we don't view that as non-negotiable, maybe you can cut the day shorter altogether.
Yeah, but you have the contract. So I can't just say the teacher's contract is going to be in 1 hour shorter per day.
No.
I mean, you know.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, or we come up with a sidebar agreement and we say, okay, the school day will be 1 hour shorter and, you know, that would have to be negotiated.
Just one last question. When the survey goes out, will the system check it by elementary, middle school,
Yes.
high school level?
Yes.
So high school parents are not answering elementary
Yeah,
school?
it'll actually, and community members that don't have children in the system can weigh in too. So business owners and things like that, and we'll be able to track it all and figure out who's weighing in at where. What
But you'll
levels.
correlate with who has
Correct.
students where.
Correct. Mr. Orsini, did you want to? Yep, go ahead.
But on the survey, all people will be asked about each level and to rank there too. So if I only have students in elementary, I'm still going to be asked about middle school. I still can answer for middle school and high school. If I'm a business owner, community member in town, and let's say, you know, I have a lunch spot, you know, I might weigh in on start and end times. All community members may, because it may affect things like traffic patterns. And so even if you only have a child in one level, you will still be asked to give us feedback on what you think would be the best two at every level. Yes, and we are fortunate to be working with an outside contractor who does surveys for their livelihood, who have a lot of experience doing these types of surveys. So they know how to build in the skip logic, how to tease out the data. They will really work with us on the data analysis as well. So we have met with them several times to share how we would like to be able to tease out the data as well.
And just remember, like, as we said, when people weigh in on the survey, it's not a vote and that's what we have to go with. It's just to start getting a real feel from the community and then we can make the decisions. Because like Ms. Fulcher said, if like two of the top things are put the 815 for two different levels, we have to make some kind of decision as a community and figure that all out. Mr. Orsini wanted to add one thing and then we'll get to the other thing.
So I was just going to add to the instructional, the longer periods that are potential. You know, when we made this change at the middle school 15 years ago from 40 minutes to 60-minute periods, the same angst was there. It's too long for the kids. They're not going to be able to pay attention. And you know, during COVID, obviously, 100% right. That was very difficult. To just throw the longer periods at the kids because the teachers weren't trained at it. There was no planning for it. We were thrown into a horrible situation where obviously Stacy, Tom, and the whole community group are going very deliberately into how we're going to make this change. So our really strong teachers, which is almost all of our teachers are going to thrive, whether it's still 60-minute periods or 80-minute periods or 90-minute periods, because we're going to give them the support that they need, and then we'll give extra support to the teachers that struggle with it. And our kids will get used to it, just like our elementary kids are with the same teacher for like 3 hours in a row a day. I think our older kids can handle being with their teachers for 80 minutes.
Okay. Hi, I am this is too loud, a local pediatrician. I'm a school physician, and I'm also on the New Jersey American Academy of Pediatrics Committee for delaying school start time. And I started the Start School Later chapter here in Ridgewood. So I am here with a wealth of information that I feel like people need to really look at and digest and understand before going and filling out a survey. I would encourage everybody, go to startschoollater.net just as a baseline, because there is a wealth of information that's out right now about kids and sleep. We often undervalue the meaning of sleep, and you see that throughout a lifespan. But what we have learned over the past probably 20 years is that when kids start puberty, which really does not start in middle school, it starts for a lot of our kids, 4th grade, 5th grade, and later, their circadian rhythm, like Dr. Gorman said, shifts. What does that mean? It means that a kid who used to go to sleep at 8 o'clock suddenly won't go to sleep till 9:30. It would be great if parenting could fix that, but it can't. It is something universal around the globe. So let's start with that all adolescents around the globe have a shift in sleep phase. And we don't totally understand why this happens, but the melatonin surge that you guys have all heard of, melatonin, comes roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours later in adolescence. So we're fighting biology. And just when we're starting school, even earlier is when the kids go through this shift. So we put them in a bind. And now that we have this knowledge, and now that we have this information, we're, at least from my point as a physician, I feel like we're obligated to act on the increased knowledge we have. Why is it so important? What does sleep do for kids? Kids, now this movement to start school later is across the country and actually around the globe. There are lots of different countries. I forgot the latest I saw. California is changing next year, the entire state. 8:30 is the absolute earliest for middle school or high school in California. There's bumps along the way, so I'm really glad we're having a community-wide discussion. What happens to school performance? Grades go up, average SAT scores go up, absences go down, tardiness goes down, illnesses go down. Mental health conditions improve. We know there's an increase in anxiety and depression and eating disorders. Those things all get better. Attention span. We have a lot of kids who have issues with attention. That gets better when sleep is sustained and promoted in a way that works with their biology. Car accidents have been demonstrated to decrease with later school start times. It's a safety issue. And in addition, it also affects juvenile delinquency, for lack of a better word, kids who are acting out. So it is really important that we all understand and educate ourselves about that, because the more that we as parents and community members know and understand about that, it's the closest thing to a silver bullet that we've got that affects all of these issues. Also, athletic performance, less injuries with 8 hours or more of sleep, 50% less in some studies, and greater athletic performance and accuracy. So I really, really would encourage you all to go online and check that out. Now, I have a few more questions. One is the rigidity about the total school hours. I'm finding a little baffling. If we cut 1 minute from each class during the day, if the school schedule was 10 minutes less, maybe we could work around that. I find contracts to be not a satisfying reason to me. I think it's important to look at how our times do compare to other districts and to other high-performing districts, because that's what we are aiming for, is to be one of the top-performing districts. In the country, the top-performing districts are making this change. So I think it is really important for Ridgewood to be up there because we all want to do the best for our kids. If, um, if, if there is evidence about the 80 to 90-minute classes, which many of us find difficult because I find it difficult sitting through a lecture for 80 or 90 minutes. Is it possible just to make that available to us? Because I'd be very
Yeah, I mean,
interested.
there's a lot of research out there, but remember, they're not lectures. So it's, you're breaking them into 15-minute,
Understood.
20-minute
But
activities.
if you could just put some stuff on the website, then we can read through it. It would
Sure.
be really useful for us so
Yeah.
we can.
Do you have a last comment? Because we have to move to other people. So, all right, thank you. Ms. Weinkoff? Thank you for sharing all that information. Right here in front of you.
Hi, so I have a question and I also wanted to make a point. So the question is that I saw on the slide for the non-negotiable items, you had reduction of instructional time. I also noticed that on the options that you proposed, there were options where overall, actually the time is cut down, the total school time. So I couldn't
Right.
reconcile.
No, so what happens, we were saying was, if you change some of the school days, so right now you have 6 periods. One example is if you went to 4 periods, you'd be losing 5 minutes of transition time around the building, gaining back, say, 10 minutes a day or something like that. So that's why the school day looks shorter, but you're not impacting the instructional time because they're meeting less classes per day. That's just one example.
Got it. And then also, I heard that, we already have enough instructional time when we look at our district, but there are other schools that I'm aware of, at least, like even if I were to compare with Bergen County Academies, where our instructional time is much less on a regular basis already. So,
Yeah, I wouldn't say much less. I know we're pretty high up there with throughout the whole state, because I remember looking at this, we're in the top for the longer instructional school day. We are. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, Mike, you can go to the other side, Mike.
Thank you.
Hi, I just had a question with the surveys that were going out. Are all students also going to be surveyed? or
No,
only
just
ag-
6 through 12.
Just 6 through 12, but
Yeah.
all 6 through 12 students will
Correct.
be surveyed. And will they be given information on the survey about the block time changes? So that will be outlined.
Yeah, you're going to see similar things with the options there, but like we're not determining, we'll say the same information. It could result in longer blocked periods of time. I don't know what those minutes would be, though.
Got it. Okay. And will there be a question that students can answer about how they feel in terms of their own attention in the block times?
Well, they could do it in the open-ended part at the end of the survey. They could just type in whatever they feel.
Okay, but there's no direct question. Do you feel you're
Well,
engaged?
just,
for the
we
80
have to be
minutes?
very careful because like 60 minutes, which is what we have now for the most part, is considered block. So
Okay.
you got to be careful, like, when you just talk block,
Right.
so it gets
Sorry.
very, very complicated when we're talking to, a lot of these things.
Right. So that's my real question is how are you going to phrase it to the students? For example, I have 3 high
So
school
this, again,
students.
this is just talking about the parameters, getting feedback.
Right.
Then what we figure, if we are moving forward and things are going well, and we have to really come up with schedules, then maybe we could do another survey based on that, say, the middle school or the high school. Hey, do you want this or this? That wouldn't affect the whole community because again, the guts are just being worked out. It's not going to affect the beginning or the end of the school day per se, like, a huge amount of time.
Okay. But students will be asked at one point in time or another for their input about how they feel they're engaged in the longer class periods.
Yeah, right. Right. But just with that said, like, you just can't put that on paper. There's a lot of explanation that has to go with that and a lot
Right,
of
that's what-
education.
Right.
Yeah. Because
So
if you just said to anybody, oh, of course I don't want 90 minutes. But then like, if you said, well, here are the other options and why it has to work and what the rotations are, they'd be like, wait, I didn't know that. And then they,
Right. So students, before they're being surveyed, also need to be educated as to what they're being asked specifically, and then for their input as to how they're being engaged during those longer time periods.
So our principals have said that they will do some kind of orientation prior to giving the survey to the students. So almost similar to what we did tonight, right? Mr. Orsini would either create a video or in assembly format, however works best for him, connecting with his students to explain, look, we're thinking about a change in middle school options. You know, we may start a little later. If we start a little later and keep our schedule, this is what it would look like. If we, you know, start a little later, we would and have longer periods. This is what it would look like, and talk them through that before they take the survey. And they will take the survey in school during a class, you know, because we found that when we, you know, especially as the students get older, if we kind of just send it to them in email
Right.
and ask for their input, we don't get the level of participation we would like.
Right.
So it will be, the students will be oriented before they take the survey.
Got it. And for the second survey that comes out after, you know, talking more about the guts, that will again go out to.
Yeah, I mean, that's just
students
a
as well.
suggestion. I mean, we haven't thought that all through yet. Yeah, we want to see how this all information will start driving our next steps, but it is an option.
Got it. Okay.
Right here, Mike. Go ahead. Mike, go ahead. I thought you had the mic on.
I just want to first, say thank you for how incredibly comprehensive the presentation was. I'm really grateful for it, and it's just, it's a great reminder of what a great job the Board of Ed and the whole school system in Ridgewood does. I guess I have a question after my comment, but I want to just be clear that I'm speaking not, as a parent, certainly with 3 children in the school system, but also as a behavioral health psychologist. And I got to say that I find it a little confusing how the issue of later start times is being, sort of confounded with the issue of how long or short the class periods are, because the later start time issue, really comes out of biology, and there's no, it's sort of like, there's no argument, there's no counter argument to later start time data and children's performance, mental health, everything you've said. That's why, California changed the total state law. A state with 60 million people had to go to this law. Why? Because because their primary concern is the well-being of teenagers. So I'm a little confused about that. But my main question is, having been present at the Board of Ed meeting in 2017, when the New Jersey Department of Education, data study was presented, and folks came from the high school. So my biggest question is, why has this taken so long?
Yeah, and I was trying to explain that a little bit in the timeline. We started having those conversations, and then we were moving into the larger, because what we realized, it's not just a high school thing. And some people just make a switch at the high school. It impacts so many things with the whole community. We started having those discussions, and then unfortunately the pandemic hit and just slowed everything down. And that's when we were able to just bring it back this year. Absolutely. So
Like I say, it has been exciting to hear this, and I guess I'd be remiss. I mean, my daughter Isabel, in 11th grade, she'd be angry at me if I didn't actually quote her in saying, having said, "Oh, it's just my luck. I'm sure they won't do it by the time I graduate."
now, and one school that we talked to actually did go ahead with the change. The pandemic hit and they put it all on hold. So it's been on hold for 2 years. They didn't want to do it during the pandemic because they just knew, because you want to get, have a successful start. And they just knew if they did it during the pandemic, it just wouldn't work well. So I think they're going to start it next year. I'm not exactly sure though. Anybody else with questions? Yeah, Mike, you might have to work around.
Hi, I'll admit I was a little apprehensive coming here tonight, but I wanted to say thanks for a very clear and concise presentation. I certainly appreciate how much of a logistical and practical challenge this is at the school district level and at the parental level, like all of us here. It sounds to me like another non-negotiable is going to be the staggered start times for the schools. And then you also mentioned, I think, the flex period. So if you could just clarify how that might work, does that mean something like elementary and middle school might start at the same time, but middle might have a start flex, so that's some buffer to let parents, deal with transportation? If you just clarify that, thanks.
So we really can't have schools starting at the same time just for the logistical, if I have a middle school or an elementary school, I can't drop them off at the same time if they don't, busing aside. The flex period at the elementary is meant to add a period that would enable our staff to do some things with our students that we have a kind of a hard time squeezing in right now. And it still fits in within the parameters of the length of the school day. So, it would give us an opportunity, like I said, to assign some different types of experiences, and we would like to explore that further should we go in that direction. It would enable us to provide more enrichment, for example, or supplemental instruction, so that period could be placed anywhere in the day. It might be in different places for different grades, but it would allow us to be able to provide additional experiences for our kids. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, so.
Yeah, thank you.
So just as a high school student, I know that I have a certain amount of homework each night, and especially as a high school student who's in a lot of sports, I do 3 seasons of sports, and so I think I should have a slight concern with the fact of if school is ending at a later time, so you say even perhaps 30 minutes later, which then hypothetically high school activities or after school activities, those are ending again at a later time, and with the same amount of homework that I'm continually going to have, wouldn't that still affect the time I'm going to bed, versus if I still have 2 hours of homework, that will cause me to stay up later and getting home at a later time. I feel even with the later start time, I'm just concerned about the effect that will it even have an effect with still having the same amount of homework? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks for asking. I'm Jeff Nias. I'm the principal of the high school. Dr. Gorman and Ms. Polstra did a great job, obviously explaining a lot of this, and that timeline you saw in the beginning, I feel like I was a part of this from the beginning, working with Smart Balance and things. So we've done a lot of things before the later start time, as we mentioned, that really has helped student well-being. To answer your question, if we have less periods, you'll have less homework each night. Does that make sense? Because if you have 4 or 5 periods a night instead of 6, you'll have less homework because you could only potentially get 4 or 5 classes of homework. So that's one thing. And as Dr. Gorman has mentioned, the guts of the schedule really hasn't been decided in terms, we still have to work really hard with the teachers to come up with the best schedule that's going to benefit, first and foremost, the students. So we're going to really be looking at that carefully, and athletics and activities after school are going to be, we want to accommodate them. And it is our hope, I want to mention this, that if we do this, that other schools will do this also. And then activities will not be the issue because they'll be doing them a little bit later too. So.
And I just want to thank the 4 of you for coming out. These students, not all, any of you guys go to Ridgewood or? Yeah, so they're doing they're getting some credits from Bergen Community, I believe, right? And they're here for a homework assignment for some of this. And they're actually high school students in another school. So welcome. We enjoy you guys being here. So maybe you could bring some of these ideas back to your school. So who's got the
Just
mic?
right here.
All right, go.
Just a question on the mention of the minimum increase of the 15% on the bus costs. This might have been covered, so apologies if I'm asking questions that were already answered. There was a mention of that 15%. There's also a mention of potential bus shortages.
Yeah.
Does the 15%, is that strictly estimated based off of schedule changing, or does that factor
No,
in?
so it's 2 different things that are going on. Just because of the bus shortage that's going on nationwide and especially in New Jersey, as of January 1st, the bus companies are going to be coming out with new rates. We've been told at the state level to expect anywhere between 15 and 30% increases. We think 30% is going to be a little too high. So we're really trying to say 15, 20% is probably more realistic. So just right off the bat, next year's budget, we're going to have to add 20% to our busing costs.
Okay, so
That has nothing to do with the change.
Okay.
Then with the change, if we did that and we came up with some things and the bus companies will go out for bid, and they said we have to do, just say, 4 more bus routes, you're looking at probably $80,000 or more just to add those more buses. They might come back with 6 routes and they might come back with less. I don't know. So we have to, I won't know until we do that.
So that potential 80,000 would be in addition to the potential.
Correct.
And I realize.
Yes,
it's
you're going
potential
up, you're
and not
going up, say,
potential.
20% no matter what.
Right.
And then on top of that, that would be another 80 to 100,000, depending. Hopefully it'll be a little less. And again, if the community was okay with putting middle school and high school students on, we figured that out and we were able to consolidate buses, you actually could save a lot of money.
Right.
And a lot of districts are saying that. I know a lot of people are fearful of putting high schoolers with middle schoolers, but it has been done. It has been done successfully. It's just another option that we're going to try and get feedback on.
Are there considerations of like, what, if anything, might have to be cut, or what, basically how that would be funded, I guess? Or is it too early to tell?
No, yeah, I mean, we're not, I'm not looking at cuts right now.
Hi, I want to thank you so much for this presentation and for this community-wide dialogue. In terms of instructional time, I feel strongly that we as a community should be able to weigh in on a schedule at the high school of, for example, of an 8:30 start and a 3:05 end time with a very minimal amount of shaving off some instructional time. I'm not aware of any research to show that more instructional time is better. The ranking sites no longer include instructional time. Why? Probably because there's no research behind that more is better. And there are many other high-performing school districts that have less instructional time than we have, and they're outperforming us. Yet we do have the research that an 8:30 start time is what our students need, with all the benefits that was outlined and discussed tonight. I think everybody can agree on an 8:30 start time is what the students need. And in terms of those that are concerned about the academic performance, the 8:30 time supports that. And again, more instructional time is not necessarily equated to better outcomes. The 80-minute block, the 80-minute classes, a lot of the students struggle. They do. They struggle even with the 80 minutes. So the concept of going to a 90-minute, even if the teachers are excellent, and they are, a lot of the students struggle even with the 80-minute ones. The other thing that's a concern at the high school is that, if we end the school day too late, we're not going to get support for it, I don't think, as a community. There's going to be too many in the sports community, extracurricular activity, where they're just not going to be on board if it's any later than 3:05, 3:10. And the other concern of having these larger class times, thank God for the freeze. These frees are really important to the kids. They need some time to decompress, to be able to get some homework done. But as we know, if an 80-minute free at times is concerning for some parents. So if we go to 90 minutes, that's going to be an issue. And then when teachers are absent, then if they get a double free, a triple free, I'm one of those parents that loves it when my daughter has a double, a lunch and then a free. These kids are maxed out. They need some time to decompress, get homework done. A lot of these students are doing homework during lunch, during free time, during their free period, and they're still having a lot of homework late at night. I know there's a lot of concerns of screen time. Parents need to talk to their kids about that. Kids need to take ownership over that. But there's a lot of students that are up until midnight, 1 a.m, doing homework, and that's even with doing homework during their free. So I can't emphasize this enough that I really feel super strongly that the high school on the survey, that we as parents, the students, the community should be able to weigh in on a 8:30 start time, end time 3:05, with just a small amount of a reduction of instructional minutes, and let the community weigh in on that on this initial survey that's going out.
Yeah, actually, you summarize all the issues that we presented tonight and all the issues and the problems and the challenges that were faced. I'm not trying to, just remember, there is a contractual obligation that has been negotiated between the board and the teachers union. You just can't, you can come up with a sidebar and you can renegotiate that, but that takes time and effort. If that's something that the will of the people and everybody and the union wants to do, you have to open up to change a lot of things like that, so there are parameters you're set by. Up there, and then we'll come down to you.
Hi, so thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was very well thought out, and I appreciate all the time that's been taken. Full transparency, I was actually on and am on the alternate schedules task force, so I speak with a little bit of knowledge of the work and the research that went into this. I want to address the question of those longer class periods, 90 minutes. And the reason why is because when it was first introduced, the concept was first introduced to me at, a task force meeting. My first response was absolutely not, no way, it's just, I can't do it. I can't do it at my 55 years. My kids can't do it at, 12, 14, 17. And then, and I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot, Stacy Polstra, and I hope you don't mind, but Stacy Polstra was speaking about her experience as a middle school teacher, and you guys introduced, what you said, Dr. Gorman, about how this has been going on since the 80s. And it's not simply a matter of the school and the learning and the teaching that we're used to simply being expanded to 90 minutes, but that different things happen. And that explanation really helped me to understand that it wasn't, what it seemed to be at first blush. And I'm wondering if, I know you said it's not just lectures, but I'm wondering if maybe you or Stacy or Jeff or someone can speak to how learning and teaching methods would change during a 90-minute block period so that we really do understand what we're looking at.
Sure. So yes, I have been teaching since the 80s. So when
Sorry.
middle school, that's okay. When middle school teaming first began, I was in a school that was a traditional junior high school. We shifted to a middle school model. And, there were different schedules over the course of my career as a teacher, everything from 42 minutes to 50 minutes to 90-minute blocks. And, as a teacher, especially now with all the tools that teachers have at their disposal in terms of technology, in terms of all interactive media, in terms of the resources that our teachers and students have at their fingertips, a 90-minute period could fly by, in any subject area. So for example, the idea during a 90-minute period that you can't do really well in a 40-minute period would be something like, I'm going to throw up, a question for kids to consider. There's going to be a series of documents around the room that present different perspectives on that. Kids are going to stop at each station for 10 or 15 minutes, answer a few questions, take some notes, talk to their classmates, go back to their seats, do some independent thinking for another 10 or 15 minutes. So if you've got 5 stations, that's 50 minutes. Collaborating with your peers, you're at 65. And then, holding some kind of Socratic discussion with a short writing piece at the end. And you've gotten to 90 minutes in the blink of an eye with the preparation that could be done in place. If you're going to do things like have kids give one another feedback, if you're going to have students watch a certain video clip, if you're going to have them build out a graphic organizer, there's so much that could be done to move students and actively engage them in a 90-minute period. And keep in mind, you're not going to see them every day. So I'm seeing my students for 90 minutes in a social studies class, and then I'm not going to see them for the next day, but the day after that. So it's a very intentional level of planning when you go into those 90-minute periods to be thinking about, as a teacher, what's the best way to engage my students and how can I ensure that, there's not a passive delivery of information that is very old school. That's how I went to school. And now, our teachers, as the professionals that they are, have really meaningful ways to engage kids with the learning that are much more student-centered and involve them. And so mixing up the types of activities they do, engaging all those modalities, reading, writing, speaking, listening, viewing, sharing, creating is all part of the student experience that could be worked into a 90-minute period.
We have like time for 2 more, 3 more, and then, okay.
Hi,
Hello.
good evening. Thanks so much. My name's Aurora. I'm RHS class of 1999, and we had a block schedule back in the day, back then. And I want to say Ridgewood usually is way ahead of the times in terms of their scheduling. I'm also a teacher in a different district in Passaic County. And at the high school, we have a 7:20 a.m. start time, which is pretty brutal. My husband is also a teacher at the same school. So I worked at this school for 16 years, both my husband and I had to kick and scream just to get a transfer because I knew my kids were starting elementary school in Ridgewood, and I would need to drop my kids off at 7 a.m. for early drop off.
Right.
And there was no way to get to Passaic County half an hour away in time for school to start. So I know a lot of the issues, and I think they are important because they do affect families and family dynamics and what kids do. I just had a couple questions. One was with the elementary school schedule. I also want to keep the teachers happy because I think in Ridgewood we have great teachers and we want them to be happy and supported and not angry. In terms of the elementary schedule, I'm a little confused in terms of the flex because with the 2 options, it looks like from the outside, it looks like the teacher schedule is a half an hour longer of a day. But then contractually, how does that work or how is that covered? Is that extra money? Who's watching my kid that extra half hour if it's not an extra half hour added on to the teacher's contractual day?
Right. I'll let one of you guys will come up. And then Jen, can you just go over here? We have 2 left over here.
And then I had a question about the high school schedule.
All right. You want to throw the high school one at us real quick, and then we'll get the elementary.
In terms of the high school, I guess, as far as the new schedule, I saw a couple options. One was 2 were a half hour and one was 45 minutes later. One question was why a 15-minute later start is not one of the options at the high school level, because I feel like even 15 minutes would be something moving in the right direction versus jumping all the way from a half
You're
hour
right.
or 45. And I know you guys said you're still working on the schedule of the day. But I'm curious as to how like science blocks would work out with like labs and things like that with the alternative schedules and later starts. Also, as a teacher, I don't really want my athletes leaving my class and missing my class multiple days out of the week. Even on a rotating drop schedule, they'd still be pulled out of science class. And as a teacher, that would be a concern of mine.
Hello, Aurora. Aurora Dudley. I taught you, Aurora. So long ago. How are you? So I can answer that question. Basically, the reason we're not going to we're not considering an 8 o'clock start time at the high school, or is because of the later we go in closer to that 8:30. That's the magic number for the American Pediatrics Academy. So that's that. And I understand what you're saying as far as shifting the day. It does get where it's going to interfere with other things. So that's the balance that we really want to, but again, there's a lot of different minds going into this, especially at the high school. And I think we will be able to come up with something that's going to satisfy both giving the kids what they need is the sleep and getting the kids to be able to do the activities as well.
And just real quick, in terms of the elementary, it's more of a shifting of the teacher's time in the day. It's a little hard to explain without going through all of the specifics of a schedule, but it'd be more of a shifting than an addition, if that makes sense.
Might be our last question.
Yeah, so just hearing a lot of the comments from the parents here, I just worry we might be missing the mark if we delay the day at the start and then delay the end date as well. So my request to you or my ask of you is if the survey is just informational only, if it's just one data point, it's not binding, can we include another option on there saying, would you be willing to have a later start time with a similar current end time, but less instructional time, just to see what parents' opinion on that is? I know there's a contractual obligations and all of that has to weigh in, but just to get that data point, because if it seems like an overwhelming majority, come back and say, yes, that's something they'd love, then maybe we do want to look at a contractual solution. And if it looks like the majority of parents don't want to reduce instructional time, then we know it's non-issue and we can just proceed as planned. So just my suggestion,
Sure.
just to gather that data point.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. That's a good point to end on. So thank you. Thank you for coming. This conversation obviously is not over. And as we gather more data, we'll share it out and we'll continue this discussion and we'll see. And as we get the data, it will inform us how we're going to move forward. And hopefully we can keep narrowing this down like a funnel and come up with the right solution for everybody. But thank you for your time, for your questions, and we'll be seeing you soon. Take care, everybody.